Hi, my name is Professor Robbie Wilson. Today I want to share a new method with you that we've developed that uses small-sided games to identify talented young players. Before moving on, I want to thank our funding and research partners, in particular the 2 Brazilian clubs involved with this study. We know it can cost millions of dollars to bring new professional players into a club, but a player that's developed within a club's academy will cost a fraction of this amount. And selling an academy player can make the club millions in revenue. For example, Mason Greenwood joined the Manchester United Academy before the age of 10, potentially saving the club millions of dollars. Philippe Coutinho joined Vasco da Gama before he was 13, earning his former club millions when he moved on. Today, professional clubs can't survive without a youth development program, and central to its success is finding the best players available. Now, there are 2 basic approaches to identifying players: scouts and science. Both have their strengths and weaknesses. Scouts are the most common method. Scouts observe players in competitions and provide recommendations to clubs. Players are then brought in for trials. Using scouts is a trusted and successful approach, but scouts are humans and they have inherent biases. Each scout has their own personal view on what makes a successful player. And even when this view is based on years of scouting, it is vulnerable to inconsistency and error. Science can help to remove human biases and uses statistics to select players. However, scientific methods for talent ID are not well developed, proven, or trusted. There's untapped potential here that can help improve talent ID. But I'm not here to suggest that science will replace scouting, as I think the future of talent ID will combine scouting and science. Today, I want to share a new scientific approach that we've developed that I think will help clubs select better players more consistently. We use science for talent ID using 2 different approaches. First, by looking at a player's physical or technical abilities in isolation, or by looking at how they perform within a team using small-sided games. In both cases, we use cutting-edge statistics to look at the abilities of individuals. So let's look at these methods a little more closely. We can assess players in isolation by measuring a player's dribbling speed, sprint speed, agility, fitness, or even passing ability. We can then compare players' abilities across different teams, competitions, and nationalities. This gives us a great idea of how the player might perform in a game. But we don't really know how they actually use these abilities when the pressure's on and they're out there with teammates and against opponents. Alternatively, we can assess the talent of individuals using small-sided games. Obviously, it's great to assess a player while they're in a game situation. This is where it's easy to fall back on gut feeling if we're not careful, because separating a single player's data from the team is complex, and for this we need our statistical approach. The difficulty is, in a game, a single player's performance depends not only on their own abilities, but also their teammates and the opposition. We can't just compare player X to player Y if they're in different teams playing against different opponents. We can't even compare them if they're in the same team, because one of them might be a forward and the other a defender. So we need a method that takes all of these complexities into consideration. This is what we've been working on, using statistics to pull an individual's abilities out of their complexity of a team sport using small-sided games. I'll walk you through what we've done and why it can help coaches identify talent that scouts might miss. In our method, each player plays a series of small-sided games in different teams and against different opponents. We use a field measuring 30 meters by 25 meters with 2-meter wide goals. Each team has 3 players and no goalkeeper, and each game lasts 4 minutes. The only data collected are the identity of all competing players, the final score, and the identity of each goal scorer. Pretty simple. For example, this player, Ronaldo, plays 30 small-sided games. And remember, every time it's different. So Ronaldo plays in 30 different teams against 30 different teams of opponents. By putting Ronaldo in all of these different situations, we can better identify his abilities relative to his teams and opponents. We need Ronaldo to play in many games to extract his abilities or performance from the team environment. In each game, Ronaldo is given an individual score based on his goals scored, the goals scored by his teammates, and the goals scored by the opposition. Let's say in the first game, Ronaldo scores 2 goals, and his teammates score 1 goal, and his opponents score 2 goals. This means Ronaldo's team score is +3. His opposition scores 2, and his net performance is +1 goal. If we look at this over all his game, and here it's just 9 of his games, we can calculate his average net score. This represents his average contribution to his team. Whatever team he's on, he contributed on average plus 1.11 goals per game. That is, Ronaldo positively impacts his team by an average of plus 1.11 goals per game. Using this method, we can measure the abilities of all individuals as they're playing in games, independent of the quality of their team or opposition. And we can identify the kinds of contributions they make, regardless of whether they're strikers or defenders. Recently, we used this method to assess talent in 3 teams across 2 elite Brazilian academies, where the professional teams play in the Brazilian Serie A. Now, it's important to remember we aren't comparing between these groups. We're identifying talented players within the groups. To make it work with up to 37 players in a 2-hour testing session, we ran several games on several fields at the same time. First, we must set up the multiple fields and have a location where the players meet before the game. They are assigned at random a field and team to play on. They move to their field and they have their identities recorded. Players have a wristband and a number on their shirt to make identification easy. After their game, they return to the central area for next game setup. Data collection during this time is very simple. We record the number of goals scored by each player on each team and their overall score. Here, each player on the orange team scored 1 goal each. One player on the black team scores 3 goals, and the overall score was 3-3. We ran 2 to 3 sessions for each group of players, allowing each individual to compete in around 30 games. We then collate all the data for each individual for analysis. Here are the data summarised for each individual. Here we have the identity of each player. Here the average goals they scored per game. The next column is the average number of goals their team scored per game. Here is the average goals scored by their teammates per game. Here is the average goals their team concedes per game. And finally, here is the average net goals scored per game by the individual. So let's review some of the important results from our work. First, we wanted to know if our scores for individuals are consistent. That is, if a player is good one day, then will they be good on other days? Consistent results give us confidence that we are measuring the real quality of players. This figure shows that those players that have a high score on day 1 also have a high score on day 2, and vice versa. Those individuals that have a low score on day 1 also have a low score on day 2. Second, we wanted to see if there were multiple ways for players to be successful in the small-sided games. We would not want to use this method if only the high goal scorers could achieve high success. Our measure of overall success is each player's average net goals per game. Our data can reveal 3 possible ways we can measure how each individual contributes to their team. First, we measure how many individual goals they score, their scoring ability. Second, we can measure how many goals on average their teammates score per game, a measure of their ability to create goals. And finally, we measure how many goals their team concedes per game, a measure of their defensive ability. This figure shows that the more goals an individual scores per game, then the higher net goals per game. Remember, that's our measure of overall success. We also find that good defenders, those that concede few goals per game, also have high net goals per game. And finally, we found that players whose teammates were more likely to score also tended to have a higher net goals per game. Together, these results show that there are multiple ways for individuals to be successful in these small-sided games. We found exactly the same pattern across each of the 3 player groups we work with. Again, this gives us confidence that our results are robust and likely to apply to any team we work with. Our method is repeatable and consistent, but looking across these data can be complex and difficult. Our next challenge was to include all of these data, a player's scoring, creating, and defending performance, into one figure. So anyone can view a player's results simply and rapidly. So let me work through this figure slowly. First, individuals are represented by the small black dots. The background color represents the average net goals per game. Red is higher and blue is lower performance. The x-axis on the bottom represents the average scoring, creating, and defending ability of a player. All the players on the right of the plot are in the red zone. That is, they have a high net goals per game, our measure of overall success. All the players to the left are in the blue zone, a poor performance. The further up the plot, the y-axis, the more the individuals rely on goal scoring for their success. The further down the plot, the more the individuals rely on defending ability. Here, we have a high-performing individual that relies on goal scoring. Here, we have a high-performing individual that relies on defending. Well, this high-performing individual could be considered a goal-scoring defender. These players here might be in the top 10, but they rely equally on defensive actions and goal scoring. Again, when we looked across each of the 3 groups we work with, the results were very consistent. So in summary, our method is the only scientific protocol that is reliable, consistent, and unbiased. It not only measures a player's performance in small-sided games, but also shows how a player influences a game, whether it be via scoring, creating, or defending. Finally, our method is easy to set up and run during any training or trial days. In a future video, I will also discuss how you can take our method and apply it to any small-sided game, no matter how many players on each team. Thank you for watching, and please do not hesitate to contact me with your questions. Thank you.